Hey guys, Craig here from the Build a Beamer series. Yeah, a short-ish video right now just to give you some insights into what we found as we started to try and deal with understanding the radiator on the E46 race car. Possibly more questions than answers at this point, but quite eye-opening. So let me turn the camera around and then show you what I'm seeing. So we got the car started. The engine is back in the car. We fired her up and everything was looking great. Brought her up to temperature and just made sure that everything was looking good and sounding fine. But in the back of our mind is still this question about whether we've really got to the bottom of our overheating issues. And given that the front end is off the car, I took the opportunity to use a thermal camera to have a look at what the radiator was doing as it was coming up to temperature. And to my surprise, I noted that we were getting effectively a cold zone in this bottom section of the radiator. And initially we picked it up on the thermal camera, and when I then went and felt the fins, they were literally ice cold to the touch. And it felt like I think it was about the first 7 or 8. And then after that, they were really rocking hot. And then right at the top, it felt as if one of these wasn't quite as hot, but that was a little bit less definitive. So one of the thoughts that crossed my mind was that we had some blockage in the radiator. It's a relatively new radiator, but nevertheless, we thought perhaps there may be some blockage. So this is the inlet side of the radiator, and the coolant, or the water in this case, comes in down in the tank on the side, and then moves across the radiator here. So this is engine side, and the other side is obviously outward facing. It moves across the radiator and then comes out of that port over there. And I guess it's not entirely implausible that if there was some muck that found its way into the tank, it would tend to want to block the lower channels first. So I thought, well, maybe the lower channels are blocked, and perhaps we should be looking at getting another radiator. But phoning around, we couldn't find anybody who could offer us a branded radiator. We just couldn't get any info. Certainly nobody could confirm that they could give us a bare radiator, which we understand is quite reputable. So I did get hold of a specialist radiator company, Silverton Radiators, and described my problem, and we agreed that there were basically 3 options. The one would be to bring the radiator into them for flushing and cleaning. Secondly, for them to supply a new OEM radiator, and that plan was scuppered as soon as they realized that they didn't have and could not get any stock. They are actually bare agents, but there was no stock available in the country. And the third option would be to build us a custom radiator, but that would take time and a lot more money. So I was going to take it off to them and let them flush it. And then I thought, it's probably going to cost me half the price of what a new radiator is going to cost anyway. So I thought, before I do that, let me just take the plunge and take this tank off and have a look at whether or not this is indeed blocked. So it's actually quite easy to get these tanks off the side. You just lever the little aluminium tags off, which I did on the bottom side, and then effectively are able to just peel that up and out of the way. And this became quite telling. So let's have a look at what we saw once we got that end off the radiator. And surprise, surprise, we've got clearly the top section of the radiator, which is well used. There's a little bit of evidence of debris and stuff in some of the channels, and then the bottom section here with seven channels, which are completely clean and clearly are not seeing any flow whatsoever. And it's now quite apparent as to why it's not seeing any flow. There's a seal separating that section, and when you flip the bottom tank over, you can see that there's actually a bloody separator here. So this brilliant radiator is designed in such a way that you cannot make use of the bottom 7 channels here, which probably constitutes, I think there's about 44 fins which run across, or tubes which run across. So yeah, it's what's that, about 15% at least of the radiator capacity is not able to be used. Now, I was then reminded that when we got this radiator, it came with two of these plugs which come into the bottom, two of different lengths. This one over here that is in here already, when it screws in, it has an O-ring which seals right up at the top of this channel section over here, effectively blocking this entire section. And the reason that's necessary is that there's a great big gaping hole here, and you can see and actually get right into the shaft of that of this plug. So it's necessary to seal it with an O-ring up there to prevent fluid from dumping down this side. And bearing in mind that whilst there is a separator at this height on this side of the tank, there isn't one, from what I can gather, on this side. So the tank gets filled with fluid. This does get filled with water, but it just can't circulate anywhere. So it's just blocked on this side. So it is filled with water, and when you open the drain valve, you do dump all of the water out of the radiator. So this is clearly designed to deal with the automatic transmission version, which has an oil cooler which bolts on to this section of the radiator and is effectively a heat exchanger. And that then allows, then with a different plug in the bottom, it actually allows this port to open up and effectively creates a flow path through this heat exchanger. I'm not exactly sure what that flow path looks like, but that's clearly the idea. But this is a dumbass idea, in my opinion, given now that we've lost this 15% of the radiator. So when I saw that, obviously it made no sense at all to go off and get the radiator flushed, and so I did decide to go off to BMO and get a radiator from them. BMO help us out and support our race car project, and they give us a lot of parts for free, and those which aren't for free they give us a great deal on, and this was no exception. So this is also an unbranded radiator. It came in that brown box. There's absolutely no markings on the box. And whilst the old radiator had a QR code and some numbers, which I was unable to scan the QR code, and the numbers didn't turn up anything in terms of a search to try and find out what the background of this radiator is. The one from BMO certainly does at least have some part numbers and stuff stamped on it, and I haven't researched any of those yet. But I thought, well, now that we've got them side by side, with the little that we do know about radiators, what can we pick up as differences, if any? And I've heard reference to so-called 2-core radiators, 3-core radiators, etc. Never quite understood what it means. So I had a little bit of a gander on the internet and just confirmed that the number of cores in a radiator is basically the number of rows side by side of these cooling channels here. So this would be a single core radiator. And what is quite interesting on this radiator is if you have a look at the actual thickness of the radiator core itself, and relative to the total width of the radiator, you can see that there's quite a gap down at the end here. So the actual thickness of the radiator core with the cooling fins itself is quite a lot thinner, and effectively you can actually see there that the cores and the fins are coincident. So this is basically the thickness of the radiator, is the thickness of these cores over here. Now if we look at the new radiator, firstly these are very easy to count quite discreetly, and I think, as I said, there's some 44 of them. When you look at this radiator, the first thing that strikes you is it looks quite different. And the reason for that is that the fin density is much, much higher on this. So there's a lot more of much finer fins compared to the old radiator over here. So apparently fin density is one of the things which helps cooling. So I would give the new BMO radiator definitely an advantage over the old radiator just on the basis of fin density. Then the number of cores is apparently the more cores you go for, the more it improves and increases the surface area. And so in this case, it was not really easy to tell how many cores there are, but what was certainly apparent is that the thickness of the total
assembly is much thicker. So the radiator cores and the fins go right up to the edge of the tank housing, whereas there's a great big gap, and it's a much thinner core on the old radiator. So in trying to find out how many cores there are, it's actually not terribly difficult. You can just stick your finger in one of these holes, and you can feel. And I could actually feel now that there are 2 cores. So these appear to be a more circular design, and 2 of them side by side, like this all the way down, but fewer. So not the 40 odd that we've got here, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 22, 23, 24 of those cores. And I could verify that as well a second time after I'd taken the plug out of here. I was able to have a peek down here and see what was going on. Can't see anything now, of course, and I can't turn the flash on while I'm filming, but I'll take a still photo of that to show you the dual row of cores in there. So apparently more cores are better, so we're going to have to give the BMO radiator a bit of a thumbs up on that one as well. But more importantly, the one thing that I realized we could check is on receiving a radiator, to try and find out if it's got this stupid separator plate in there is actually quite easy, by just removing the plug and looking down the tank and seeing what you can see. And I've been pleasantly surprised that when I did that with the new radiator, I can see all the way down the length of the tank. So it does suggest that the design of this radiator is fundamentally different and will indeed allow the coolant and the water to flow all the way down. Let's see if I can get some light in there. It might help. No, this ain't working, but I'll shoot a still. Okay, so having a look now down the inside of the radiator, and you can see the 2 cores and the fact that you can see all the way through. In other words, there is no separator. So I'm really happy about that. As I say, possibly more questions than answers. Is this just an auto version versus a manual? But as I say, all of these radiators come supplied with 2 different plugs, one apparently for the auto application and the other one for the manual. So yeah, if anybody's got any insights into this and any comments, that'll be great. But so far, this cheap unbranded radiator, I think, is going to be better than this equally cheap unbranded radiator that we're getting rid of now.